The Nomad. He knelt in the snow, counting the beads that slipped past his cold, tattered gloves, rambling a prayer that he wished could save him. Hooded in leather, strands of his silvery hair hung low, almost touching the snow. It's hopeless, he realized. He was the sole survivor of his race, and the storm took away his hopes. Murmuring the last line of his prayer with shivery broken lips, he looked up. Disturbed red eyes blinked and betrayed a dark, gloomy desire to stay frozen in his moment of solitude. The never-ending ridge extended and disappeared into the fog. Below were clouds that threatened to come up and swallow the mountains. He had taken many treacherous paths. Yet the blizzard did not cease. He stood up, feeling the snow drift past. Closing his eyes, he felt the world shrink under his heavy feet, and that made him sway. Taking a few steps, his leather boots buried into the ground, he felt the squalling gust try and thwart him, and a long scabbard strapped to his side shook out of place, shivering beneath his leather armor. Wrapped in bearskin, he walked an imaginary tightrope, not allowing fear to overcome his senses. Snow flurried with the screaming wind as he measured every step. Visibility became clearer when he covered a small distance before opening his eyes. He made the mistake of looking down to see sharp peaks rising from the clouds. Calming his nerves, he quickly looked away, and then ahead was a sight to behold. A tall tower of jagged slopes, dark against the cloudy heavens. A dim smile spread across his pale face. He walked the path that connected the ridge to the mountain, shoving mounds of snow under his feet. Then he made the climb, as crumbling rocks disappeared into the mist. After finally making it to the sharp crest overlooking the mountain pass, he stood at the edge of the crest and looked below. The mountain range extended infinitely into obscurity. Probing beneath his armor, thin fur and cloth, he took something out and held it above his head. A golden cross, embedded with dull rubies, dangled from a silver chain and rattled with the wind. I have lived long enough to experience this moment. This symbol reminds me of that tarnished city from where the wolves started chasing us. I shouldn't be alive still. The wolves took them all and I can't escape them forever. If I wait too long, they will come, and then it will all be for nothing. I have to go on. The clouds billowed from all directions to swallow the peak from below. He kept groveling along the stony road that winded along the mountain. The shadows grew taller and the sky darker. He was much higher than before. The blizzard was harder to bear, and the sounds tore through his hood. Ahead was a cave, hazy and small. He took the way that led up to it, and entered the hollow conclave where darkness greeted his presence. He could feel the icicles cut through him, and the cold stillness made him shiver. The formations gleamed blue even in the darkness. He treaded lightly with a hunch to find a place to rest. Wedging himself between sharp white rocks that looked like the teeth of a giant beast, he puffed out mist, and the sound echoed. Snow blanketed him from the sides, and his head fell back in relief. The iron hilt protruding out of his scabbard glinted a cold blue. They called it Rome. Yes, that was it. Rome. False prophets, whores, and slaves. Oh, what wonders they presented before us. The glory days when he led us there to take what we craved for long. The silence was everlasting. Only the distant whir of winds were heard. A weak gale passed by and strands of his silvery hair flew with it. He looked up, his gaunt face paler than before, his dry red eyes narrowed into the dark. I remember seeing him dying in the bed when the rest went north to set a new home. After we sacked the city and after we burned the corpses, I remember pulling down those old statues of cowards, those old crumbling pillars that fell with them. I remember scattering the ashes from those ruined mausoleums. We fought them for so long, yet in the end we dined in their empty halls that were reduced to cinders and dust. We did it all together before the wolves followed us silently, slyly. Maybe we are being punished. I don't know by whom. He pulled out a burned satchel from underneath the sides of his armor skirt. Untying the charged straps, a bright shine radiated from inside. He took it out and held it in his hands, trembling slightly. An ornate silver chalice, filigree patterns of flowers wove around, and a small cross decorated the top. It reflected his white oval face in the blank spaces and shone in the darkness. The wolves cannot take me. I cannot die here. I must go on. Somewhere in the mist were tall pine trees, laden with snow at the top. Below them the wind gently whistled by, as the hooded man slept underneath one of those trees, supported by its cold bark. Steep mountains rose from far, uneven shapes of black and white running their course on them. He made it to this plateau, after treading paths that tied the mountains together. Tired as he was, the wind put him to rest. His face peaceful, drowned in sleep. Pine leaves rustled from top, as the trees swayed gently and snow speckled his armor. A faint howl echoed across his shelter. His eyes suddenly opened, red and alert, glaring through the deep woods. He jolted up and hit his head against the bark. Swaying, he clutched tight at his cold hilt, tucked neatly beneath the leather. More howls from far. He moved, footsteps heavy on the snow, holding his hilt and the scabbard pointed behind. A thin breeze darted past, sending chills down his spine. The howls grew jarring and filled the darkness. His heart thudded as he drew out the sword. It was long and sharp, gleaming in the night. The woods were thick and the night was black. Light footfalls into the snow could be heard from somewhere behind the dense thicket. There were many of them, thumping silently in the snow. He turned, pointing the hilt at the darkness. A black face appeared. It glowered at him through eyes like blazing embers, growling. It took a few steps. Saliva dripped from its fangs. The great black wolf pounced at him. Time slowed and he felt his hands move. He fell to his sides and averted the wolf, cleaving its furry white belly down to the hind legs. The growl turned to a furious whelp, and blood spouted onto his hood, reddening his white face and silvery hair. Entrails hanging out, the wolf fell in two onto snow-colored red. He made his way back to his feet, staggering and swaying. The howls grew louder now, piercing his ears. The eyes were many, and another wolf sprung from behind. This one sank its teeth into his shoulders and took him down, burying his face into the snow. It was on top of him, gouging and carving out his flesh. The sharp pain tore through him and made him tremble. He looked up and saw two more step in front. He never left grasp of the long sword. The cold, hard steel smeared with blood splayed in front of his eyes. Grasping the oak wood hilt with both his gloved hands, he rolled in agony, hearing the rumbling snarls to look into the glaring eyes of the wolf. The deep snarls were cut short as the bloody steel protruded through its furry neck and blood trickled down its dull white mouth. He stood again, throwing the dead wolf from the tip of his sword before pointing it at the two wolves in front. They pounced at the same time, one bit into his arms, ripping the leather to shreds, and the other darted straight into the tip of his bloody sword. He jerked to his side, feeling the flesh torn off his arms, and sword left his grip. Clattering below, the wolf that got spiked fell neatly from the tip of his fallen sword to merge into the darkness. He tried hard to maintain balance and caught the wolf that was at his arms by its black fur, and to hurl it across the snow. The animal's head thudded against the thick bark of a frozen tree. He clasped his wound, feeling the blood gush onto his gloves, armor, and cloak made of fur. Cold as ice, he fell onto his knees, watching the remaining wolves stand and stare. He stared through the deep red eyes, and they snarled, deep yellow eyes beaming through the night. Shuddering wildly, he groped underneath his armor and took out the chalice, and crimson spilled over silver. It is now mine, and shall be filled with the blood of all your slain brethren, he whispered eccentrically, manic with rage. Then all of a sudden they became silent as the mist that loomed behind them. They left him, disappearing into the mist beyond the blackwoods. Sound of them scampering in the dark echoed from a distance and then faded away. The wound cut too deep and blood spewed below. Onto darkness, nothingness, emptiness. He could not feel himself kneeling. He fell into that dark nothingness which only seemed white and strange, cold as everything was. Looking into the stars, he still felt the hard silver against the palm of his limp hands. Frozen fingers wrapped around it. Here I shall rest, where no one will ever find me. I shall keep it with me forever and take it with me to life after. A deep solace spread across his pale oval face, and the wrinkles smoothed under his closed eyelids. A grim smile extended, and he drifted off to a peaceful sleep, his bloody hands wrapped around the beech armor, holding the silver chalice smeared with red. The hood fell, and his silvery hair flew to merge with the snow. Yes, the birds have come to take me. Ah, their golden fire. He lay there limp beside the trees, eventually buried by the snowfall that drizzled through the leaves. Sealed in the frozen tomb below, mounds of ice, he would soon be forgotten, for he was a mere nomad, the last of his kind.